Hello everyone. Today, I invite you to listen to a very touching story called Boundless Happiness. Before we begin, let me ask you something. Imagine you are lying in a hospital bed. You cannot move. You cannot stand. You cannot walk outside. Every day looks the same. The white walls, the quiet room, the slow ticking of the clock. But then, someone begins to describe a beautiful world outside. Green trees, children laughing, birds flying across a blue sky. You cannot see any of it, but in your mind, it becomes real. Now imagine something even more surprising. What if the person describing that beautiful world cannot see it either? What if he is blind, but he still chooses to create happiness for someone else? Stay with me, because this story will show us something powerful. Sometimes the greatest happiness in life comes from giving hope to others. Now, let us begin our story. Many years ago, in a quiet hospital in a small city, two very sick men shared the same hospital room. The room was small. There were only two beds. One bed stood near the door. The other bed stood beside the only window in the room. The man near the window was named Samuel Carter. Samuel was a gentle man in his 60s. He had a calm voice and a kind smile. The second man was named David Miller. David was younger, but he was very weak and could not move much. Most of the time, David had to lie flat on his back. He could not sit up. He could not look out the window. At first, the two men were strangers, but when people share the same room for many days, they begin to talk, and soon they became friends. They talked about many things. They talked about their families. Samuel told stories about his wife and his daughter. David talked about his son, who loved soccer. They talked about their homes. They talked about their jobs. Sometimes they talked about their younger days. Samuel once said, "When I was young, I loved fishing by the lake." David laughed and said, "When I was young, I could run faster than anyone in my school." Time passed slowly in that hospital room, but their conversations made the days easier. Every afternoon, something special happened. Doctors allowed Samuel to sit up in his bed for 1 hour. This helped his lungs breathe better because Samuel's bed was beside the window. He could look outside. The first time Samuel sat up, David asked quietly, "Samuel, what can you see outside?" Samuel looked out the window. Then he began to speak. "Oh, David," he said gently, "there is a beautiful park outside. There is a small lake in the middle. The water is shining under the sun." David closed his eyes and listened carefully. Samuel continued, "There are ducks swimming in the water, and two white swans are moving slowly across the lake." David smiled. In his mind, he could see it. Samuel described more. "There are children playing near the water. They are sailing small paper boats. The wind pushes the boats across the lake. David almost laughed with joy. For a moment, he forgot the hospital room. The next day, Samuel sat up again. David waited eagerly. "Samuel," he asked, "what can you see today?" Samuel smiled. "Today, the park is very lively. There are many flowers. Red flowers, yellow flowers, purple flowers. Young couples walked slowly through the park. They held hands and talked quietly. The sky was clear. Birds flew across the blue sky." David imagined every detail. The park became alive in his mind. Every afternoon, David waited for that special hour. It became the best moment of his day. Sometimes Samuel described children flying kites. Sometimes he described old men playing chess on a bench. Sometimes he described a street musician playing the violin. One afternoon he said, "Oh, David, today there is a parade." David laughed. "A parade?" "Yes," Samuel said excitedly. "There are colorful flags. There are people dancing. The marching band is walking through the street." Although David could not hear the music, he imagined the drums and trumpets. Inside his mind, the parade became real, day after day, week after week. Samuel continued describing the world outside, and David continued traveling through that world in his imagination. The hospital room no longer felt so small. One night, David said quietly, "Samuel." "Thank you," Samuel asked softly. "For what?" David answered, "For showing me the world outside." Samuel was silent for a moment. Then he said gently, "Sometimes we cannot leave the room, but our minds can still travel anywhere." Weeks passed. Then, one morning, something sad happened. The nurse entered the room early. She was carrying water for their morning wash. But when she looked at Samuel's bed, she stopped. Samuel had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The nurse felt very sad. She called the hospital staff. They came quietly and carried Samuel away. David lay silently in his bed. He felt a deep emptiness in his heart. He had lost a friend, and he had lost the beautiful stories that made each day bright. After some time, David spoke to the nurse. "Could I move to the bed near the window?" he asked. The nurse smiled kindly. "Yes, of course." She carefully moved him to Samuel's bed for the first time. David was beside the window. He felt excited. All those beautiful things Samuel had described. Now he would finally see them with his own eyes, slowly, very slowly. David pushed himself up on one elbow. It was painful, but he wanted to see the park. He turned his head toward the window and looked outside. David stared in silence. There was no park. There was no lake. There were no flowers. Outside the window stood only a tall, gray wall. Nothing else, just a blank wall. David could not understand. Later that day, the nurse returned. David asked her, "Why did Samuel describe so many beautiful things outside?" "There's nothing there." The nurse looked surprised. Then she spoke softly. "Did you know Samuel was blind?" David froze. "Blind?" He whispered. "Yes," the nurse said gently. "He could not see anything. He could not even see the wall." David's eyes filled with tears. The nurse continued. "Perhaps he only wanted to make you happy." That night, David could not sleep. He thought about Samuel. Samuel had never seen the lake. He had never seen the flowers. He had never seen the parade. Yet every day he created a beautiful world for someone else. Samuel had given him something priceless: hope. And David finally understood something important. Happiness grows when we share it, when we bring joy to someone else. Our own hearts become brighter, even in pain, even in sickness, even in darkness. We can still create light for another person. And that is the meaning of this story. Sadness shared becomes half as heavy, but happiness shared becomes twice as strong. True kindness does not depend on what we have. It depends on what we choose to give. Samuel had no sight, but he gave someone else a beautiful world. Thank you for watching and listening to the story Boundless Happiness. If you enjoyed this story and found it meaningful, please subscribe, like, and share to support our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing more inspiring stories. We look forward to seeing you in our next video. Goodbye and take care.